the Around the NFL podcast. Wants you to know your college girlfriend never got over you.
That's damn right. Welcome to another episode of the Around the NFL podcast. Gregg Rosenthal sitting in this week for Dan Hansis in the host chair in the Chris Wesseling podcast studio, surrounded by a room filled with heroes. Marc Sessler, Patrick Claybon. Let's get after it.
Let's get after it. Why not? We're here. The lights are on.
Yes.
Let's acquire it.
It's another beautiful sample centered around perhaps you, Patrick.
Oh, I forgot.
I do want to hear the new Patrick Claybon theme songs really throughout this episode when it just feels right, Eric. But this one especially puts me in a nice mood on a cloudy, kind of stormy day here at NFL Network.
You're whimsically wading through a quaint neighborhood.
Do you feel they've captured, you had some issues with them not actually capturing maybe your full personhood in some of these?
Well,
I mean, it's
how
tough.
could you in a 30-second song?
Yeah,
The man
tough.
contains multitudes.
But yeah, this. I talked over the best part, but yeah, it's.
You were going to play these for your wife at some point in the household to impress her.
We have not. I should have gotten to that point.
Okay.
Not quite made it to that.
Use it when you need it.
We're reminding you. Well, yeah, maybe it's not going to work in the way Mark envisioned.
Well, no, I think it's a you don't just you find that right time.
Which is just a hammer drop. I would suggest maybe just play it for the whole family and say, "Isn't this cute? There's something fun at work today." With Daddy.
Yeah, that's.
I don't think that's using it to its maximum potential, but that's fine. We'll see.
Hey,
it's your prerogative. It's your
Hey,
song.
There's great news from work, and then it's like, oh, what is it?
Loads of it.
How are you doing, Mark?
I'm good, thank you. I arrived here very, very early this morning.
I mean, how are you doing this week without Dan? You know, famously, you started this podcast on the back end of the Damashek program without me and without Wes. So you and Dan go back further. It's like a missing appendage for you when he's out of the.
It is. I feel it's 2 weeks in a row where we haven't had our full cast.
Yes.
I find it typically I'd be one that's not here for one of those 2 weeks. So to be the person here, it's been odd. But I also when people are on vacation, we have a code not to F with each other on text. And like I texted Dan once or twice and then felt bad about it because I keep forgetting he's not even in the continental United States right now. So where he is. It's like 6 hours earlier, I believe. So
you don't want to be thinking about work when you're gone, but
no,
it's unavoidable.
Well, yeah,
it happens
when you're wired like this.
When you're built for it. Look, we're built for it. It's April 4th. We're only 3 weeks away here from the draft sneaking up on us. And we talked top 10 mock with Josh Norris earlier in the week. This week, we're going to go through as many teams as we can get through with burning desires heading into this NFL draft. You know, a basic show might call them, team needs or whatnot. But this is a little deeper than just like a need. Like, sometimes your body needs something, but sometimes your body has a burning desire.
Yeah, wants and needs are not all created equal, and these are burning desires.
Right.
And some of these teams, with what's even happened this week, I could think of a few teams suddenly like we've got major holes to fill on our roster.
And look, we've hit the top 10 pretty hard, so we're going to try to mostly focus on teams outside the top 10. But if we have some that we haven't really hit on within the top 10 or a special need, there's no rules in these games. We will do that. But before we do that, we got a big time trade to talk about. So let's get to some news here.
Allen out of the gun, takes the high snap, throws to Diggs to the left at the 5, lowers his shoulder into the end zone. Touchdown, Buffalo. A 3-yard splash from Allen to Diggs, and the Bills lead it 9-3.
That was the divisional round game-winning touchdown by Stefon Diggs during the 2020 season. His first in Buffalo, his last proved to be the 2023 season. He is headed to the Houston Texans. And I did want to play that clip just as a reminder because I think it's getting lost in these last few days. What a ridiculous success the Stefon Diggs trade to Buffalo was. Not that I should have to point this out. That was a season where he led the NFL, by the way, with 127 catches, 1,535 yards. In only 4 seasons, he had well over 5,000 yards for this team. And they were, by some measures in terms of point differential and everything like that and wins, like as successful as any team in the NFL over the last 4 seasons, not named the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, but he is headed to Houston. It's a fascinating trade. I think there's a lot of angles we can get to. Let's start from the Buffalo side, Mark. When you saw that this happened on Wednesday, did it feel to you like it came out of the blue? Were you surprised? Where do you want to go with it?
I read it described as sort of stunning and shocking, and very few stories hit that world for me at this point. But I think we had talked about open mysteries to the offseason and like unfinished business coming out of last season, even the year before. It's like, what is the future between Stefon Diggs and the Bills? And so from that angle, I am not stunned by the move. I think what they got for it is going to rankle feathers with Bills fans, and I understand that. The money side of it is a labor for the front office this season. But I feel like in terms of Stefon Diggs, this is Stefon Diggs the person. Like the player fell off a cliff a little bit after Joe Brady took over. He was, top 3 in yards, receiving, led the league in receptions, when they were about 5-5, and then the coordinator switch happened, and Stefon Diggs was not used the same way. I don't really buy this. He's not the same guy anymore. I think he can go have a great 1 year at least with the Texans, but the Bills, I think, have gone into a soft reboot mode a little bit, and Diggs, his future here felt problematic. Just there's too many reports, instances, ideas that behind the scenes he was difficult, and there was a schism between he and Josh Allen, and I'm starting to believe that was more true than I might have 6 months ago.
And this schism, essentially, right, wasn't something that developed in 2020. If we're to believe, I'm a skeptic about. I don't think Stefon Diggs is a demonstrably different person in 2024 than he was in 2022. I think the groundwork had been laid a long time ago by taking people who were prone to say those sorts of things and giving them the information to say, oh, the Bills and there's frustration. Oh, the Stefon Diggs this, and then you get all these smoke fire conversations. I think Stefon Diggs is one of the better receivers in the National Football League. I think Brandon Beane does. I think Nick Caserio does. Right. But the Bills, a conversation we have all the time about the Saints, about managing the salary cap, there's different ways to do it. The Bills went down a particular route, and now they are within the consequences of the particular route that they went down. And I don't think that they're a better football team. I think it's a preposterous idea to say that the vibes are, it's like, oh, he was a problem in the relationship. I mean, get open and have your spectacular quarterback throwing the ball. Like, who cares? He was a part of a change, a shift in this franchise where Bills fans saw incredible success because he was there.
Right. I think that's all true. And yet I do think in sports, sometimes the relationship runs its course for whatever reason. And these are humans. And being said as much, Patrick, he admitted, like, look, the Bills, especially for the 2024 season, are in a worse place today than they were yesterday.
Are we better today? Probably not. Yeah, it's a work in progress, and we're going to continue to work on that. I would just hope that people know I'm as competitive as hell, and I ain't giving in.
I want to push back a little bit on this idea that, though, yes, the Bills are resetting and making some hard decisions, and they're going to be a very different team next year than they were this year. But I see where Beane is coming from in the sense that it's like, why wouldn't they be one of the absolute favorites in the AFC still? I do think people are just jumping to this idea that they're like a deeply diminished team. When I look at their roster and I see one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, the best offensive line that the Bills have had since they've been there, some young, exciting, dynamic talent in Kincaid and Cook and Shakir, who aren't ready to be like superstars, but it's something to work with. You do still have the rest of the offseason. The Bills have shown, and they don't have much cap room, but they have shown that they're good at picking up different little pieces. And then when I look at the defense, like, it's a really good defense, and it's a really successful coaching staff. So to me, I look at them, they've defended their title in the AFC East 3 years in a row, 4 total, done it 3 times as defensive. And I look at it, and having gone through it as a Patriots fan and seeing what the Chiefs have done and other successful organizations, a lot of times when you go into a season and there's a lot of change, but the quarterback and the coach are really good and kind of the bedrock of what the team has been good, that's the year everyone sleeps on them. And it's like, no, a lot of what's good about this organization is still there. And the odds are they're not going to make the Super Bowl this year, because the odds are every year no one team is going to make the Super Bowl, especially in the Patrick Mahomes era. And then people will be disappointed in them. But I would put them right there with the Chiefs or behind the Chiefs as one of the most likely teams to make it back. And sometimes hard decisions have to be made. And I do think this was just a personal thing. It was a financial thing and a personal thing, that they were going to take this crazy big cap hit at some point when they divorced from Diggs. And it could have been this year. It could have been next year. And they kind of decided maybe this year makes more sense when we can get a second-round pick back. And there's just a lot going on, and it feels like a good time.
I think it's the confluence of all those issues, and that's why the move happened, and I don't think it's that big of a mystery. But in terms of just keeping the Bills situated right behind the Chiefs, with Josh Allen, and the fact that they're an incomplete picture, and they could pick up 3 wide receivers in the draft, and that one of them could hit, and then you've found your Justin Jefferson, possibly, right? But that's an incomplete score right now. We don't know what's going to happen. But from a perception angle, if you're a Bills fan and your Super Bowl window was sitting there wide open, and you move on from 6 of your 8 captains from a year ago, the team does look different. And I think Brandon Beane at least is being honest. I don't know if they've gotten better. I don't think we have at this point, but we'll see what's to come.
And that's the thing. And I appreciate the honesty, because it's just a preposterous, to me, right, a preposterous idea to say that Stefon Diggs was that much of a problem emotionally, that he was holding the team back that much, and that was the reason why you got ran out of your own stadium in the snow against the Bengals, or the reason everything fell apart last year. I understand there was a crucial drop in a playoff game, but the reason he's dropping the ball because he's open, right? If to drop a ball like that, you have to get open in the first place. He's still capable of doing that, and Marquez Valdez-Scantling was making great plays in the postseason. So are we thinking MVS is greater than Stefon Diggs? It's just, I just have a tough time believing that the downside of not having him on your football team anymore, going to another team in the AFC that is probably going to the playoffs, you could seriously consider the possibility that you're playing against Stefon Diggs if you're fortunate enough to make it to the playoffs. I don't necessarily buy that they're better. I get it, Greg, that they're still a good team, but
I don't buy that they're better. I just think sometimes these are humans, and the smoke that we're talking about, there were issues here in terms of him staying away from the team last year. They had the blow up after the playoff loss that he was upset about, and I heard information, and they talked about that, and you just heard publicly from Josh and Stefon that it wasn't maybe as tight as it used to be, and I did think it was interesting that Brandon Beane talked about Josh Allen being informed at various stages of this process that, despite all the reporters passing along the news, I saw something in The Athletic that's they fully planned to have Diggs on their roster, and they weren't just blowing, hot air. They finally just got an offer they liked. It's I don't buy that, especially when I hear this from Brandon Beane.
Josh and I have a pretty regular conversation on things, and I think it's important for me to make sure if I think something could happen to make sure he's not blindsided. And so I would, without going into the discussion with Josh when the last time we spoke was, I did alert him that, there had been some inquiries and it wasn't 100% off the table.
I mean, it's just that, I think this was a possibility going back for a while to the combine meetings. Now it's happened. It happened quickly this week. And I'm with you. It's personal. I think Tim Graham on The Athletic wrote a pretty involved, intense piece about, point by point of what happened. But I would just say in general, if I'm the rest of these AFC heavies, I would be annoyed that you just turned the Houston Texans volume up even more. You want to tell me about a team that's right behind the Chiefs on paper. It's not the Bills to me, it's the Texans. And it's thank you, Buffalo, for making this AFC, evolving powerhouse even more glowing and unusual to deal with.
Okay, yeah, let's hit it from the Texans side, because what an offseason that they have had. They gave up a 2025 second-round pick. But, oh, by the way, they got a day 3 pick, a round 5 pick this year back, and a 2025 6th-round pick back. And the more I thought about it, I was like, wow, those 2 picks are pretty significant. Someone actually did the, trade value chart of those 2 picks, one of them being this year versus the second round pick next year. And it's like, yeah, the Bills win that trade in a vacuum, but like just in terms of the picks being traded, but not by that much.
Oh.
So actually it was almost like a face-saving move that, okay, we did get 1 second, but we had to give up 2 picks back plus Stefon Diggs. And so that really makes it look like it was more of a salary dump than anything. It was a mix. It was a salary dump more than getting the draft asset. And Houston has to be freaking thrilled that they have Nico Collins, Stefon Diggs, Tank Dell, and Dalton Schultz as their top 4 pass catchers. And, oh, by the way, Noah Brown, John Mechie, Robert Woods are still on this roster. It's going to be a great group in terms of competition, in terms of depth on that team. It is awesome. And I think Stefon Diggs is going to give you the best Stefon Diggs possible at 31. Not that you weren't getting it in Buffalo, but he is going to be ready, and he's going to be on a team that can use him. And maybe the numbers aren't quite as high as his peak Buffalo days because there's so much competition for catches, but that he is still a really dynamic receiver for C.J. Stroud.
And gives the Texans so much just in terms of opportunity and what they can do. And not to mention they bring in Joe Mixon off season as well,
Right.
Who's soaked it literally. Almost never came off the field for the Bengals. So you had 2 AFC contenders that are going to have a couple of their best offensive players playing against them potentially down the stretch and maybe even in the playoffs. But there's so much because you go from a group that's like young and exciting, and Brown comes on mid to late last season as well, and it's like where are these contributions? And then there's just so much, and it's almost like where's the crack going to be? Like what's the flaw? And
the roster is pretty wild on offense, considering where they were 2 years ago. I mean, very few teams have transformed that quickly. Like the Bills around Josh Allen did, and now they're going in the other direction. You kept Bobby Slowick, and this Stefon Diggs thing does not need to be a 3 or 4 year commitment. The guaranteed money runs out after this year. If he turns into a problem or he is the same player, you don't even have to have him on this roster next year.
Right. There is something to me about wide receivers landing a new spot and just you getting the best possible version of them for a year or two. Not like you wouldn't later, but I just think it's a natural human thing that you land in a new place and you want to be at your very
It's
best.
a new house guest.
And
they're very polite, and then if they're there too long,
right, and they're border in terms of Diggs, he'll have a Hall of Fame case someday if he continues on this path. I think of someone was like, oh yeah, well I tweeted this out that multiple things can be true. I don't think it was a crazy move by the Bills in this spot, that it might have been time and okay. But it also is an amazing move for the Texans, and they're going to get the best version of Diggs. And got a lot of responses from Bills. Well, how are you going to get the best version of him coming off his worst season at 30? When has that ever happened? And I was like, okay, well, if you wanted to ask, Randy Moss, Terrell Owens, in the way that I'm talking about this, Steve Smith at age 35 in Baltimore. And yes, Steve Smith, and some of the, in Smith's case, he had better numbers sometimes earlier, but I mean the best version possible where it's a career resurgence. It is an excellent player. And guys that get open like Diggs, that travels, and Slowick will, I think, know how to use him. And Nico, to me, is a one, basically. He's a T. Higgins, maybe, and so Diggs and him are ones together with Dell. It's freaking amazing because the Texans are ready. We're going to be a team that people, myself included, thought I don't know, why can't they make the Super Bowl this year? And this puts it on another level. I think they need some interior offensive line help. I do think there's some issue there. They don't have any guys on their defensive line other than Anderson, which is a big other than that they've really developed that are any younger. So they need some people for the future there. They certainly need a cornerback other than Derek Stingley. This is not a perfect team. Their defense was playing better late last season, but they were kind of average throughout it's not a perfect team. But man, I would not be surprised if it's Texans-Chiefs kickoff.
Especially when you consider CJ Stroud. That was not just first season, but Bobby Slowick's first play call. There's only an opportunity to go up here. I guess unless the whispers about Stefon Diggs, maybe he goes in and he ruins everybody's relationship. I'm just going
Okay,
to hear what
I don't think
Greg,
that can happen in just.
I want to be clear here.
Enlighten me on specifically what Stefon Diggs did. So
Well,
that
there are anecdotes of him just generally that when his brother tweeted out that he should be not on the Bills, rescue him kind of thing, and he had a chance to address it, and he didn't. He stuck up for his brother, not the Bills, and there were like 4 or 5 situations like
he
that.
did have a tweet this
that's the top of the list.
Well, I also think
it's
that
not.
there's stuff we don't know about between him.
I
and
don't think
Josh,
it's anything crazy, but he did have a tweet this week that was literally a day before this trade, where you can't make this up. At the Peaky Pirate asked, does Josh benefit from having a top-tier receiver? Yes. Is he essential to his success? No. And Diggs responds, you sure? And it's just these little things, and I think it's natural because, of course, Josh benefits, and it's essential to have, like, great receivers. But I just think it's been a little bit of a credit issue between Diggs and Allen, and that it might have been a little bit of an impersonal thing. And it is what I heard between them when they were yelling and stuff, that I do think there was a little bit of like, who is more important to this team? Who made who? And if you're the two most important players on your team have a little bit of an issue in terms of sharing credit, and we've seen this from the best players of all time, it's happened. The best organizations of all time. It broke up Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones for 20 years.
It broke up Stefon Diggs and Kirk Cousins.
If that's an issue, then maybe, okay, that's the time, and they're having an interpersonal thing, and it's totally natural, but maybe it's a time to break it up.
But it literally happened in Minnesota.
We wish we could have managed things a little bit differently at the time. And what are we doing right now with the opportunity that we have to try to be successful?
Yeah.
And if you're telling me that you can't just get over it and make it work with a very talented person, then I question how much you really want to win.
But if you've just went through a season where you went into that season as an issue, and then you came out of the season and you feel like no one solved it, whether it's Stefon, Josh, the coaches, the front office, then I just think in football, like, they can still be a strong organization. And maybe you're right that they know they're taking a step back, but the time didn't feel crazy to me.
I just think you add in the money side of it, the fact that you get a pick out of it on some level, his age, maybe you don't believe that with the offensive coordinator they have that he thrived last year, and it just kind of all fits together. I mean, but there's a track record of Stefon Diggs being a slightly diva-ish wide receiver at multiple stops. That's a him thing. He's the through line.
The money side of it is crazy, though. They're taking a huge dead cap at over $30 million to trade one of their best players, which really hurts. And they probably were going to have to take a similar-ish hit if they did it next year, and they just decided, let's take it all this year. They're not going to spread it into next year. Being talked openly of actually they have a little less cap room now. They'll be able to free some up with one of their post-June first, but they have very little money to spend. They're going to have to sign their draft picks. It is crazy, and it's mismanagement that you are taking that big of a cap hit to get rid of one of your best players on a contract you signed a couple of years ago. That's a mistake. And it's partly, I would say even largely, because of the mistakes you made elsewhere on the roster, primarily Von Miller.
And it does help with perception, perhaps on the fan base side and probably on the ownership side. If you float a lot of conversation about how insufferable this person is,
to be fair, I don't think it's not insufferable, because I don't think it's insufferable. But I think Stefon Diggs' heart essentially supported the idea that like there were some issues there between him and Josh Allen. When your brother's out there saying that, and
if the money's the same,
it's passive aggressive ways on that side too to maybe get out of there.
Yeah, if the money's the same and you're in a building full of people that don't want you there, then why would you be there?
I could talk about this one forever. It is really a fascinating
forever.
Not forever.
That feels a little bit lengthy.
I just mean like it is one of the more fascinating trades I can remember in a long time in terms of great player still playing well, going from one contender to another. One is an example, Houston, of a rebuild, and I don't really believe in rebuilds in the NFL, but you gotta say Houston did it. They got lucky because look, CJ Stroud could have got taken number one, and they would have taken Bryce Young, and maybe a lot of this doesn't happen, or there are various things you get lucky,
or maybe Bryce would be successful. I mean,
right.
Well, they got lucky that they were able to trade their last quarterback for like 4 kingdoms.
But they went through a couple seasons where it was truly tear it down to the studs. Nick Caserio is still there, and just a couple years later, they are now competing for a title. And the Bills are doing the thing that's even harder, which is the most successful run they've ever had since the lost Super Bowls. To me, like the most consistent team in the NFL over the last 5 years, other than the Chiefs. And the Diggs is what put them over the top. That trade was an absolute success. The thing that was crazy to me was yesterday hearing some people pushing back on that. It was like, that was an absolute win, no matter how this ended. Do you agree, Bills fan, Eric Roberts, before we take a break?
Looking back on his time with the Bills, I mean, it was fun. I'm not going to lie. But he will be remembered because, I mean, the end was messy. It could, have gone. A breakup's never easy. But things were definitely different between him and Josh. His first few years in Buffalo, hey, we play Madden together. We're brothers. And that kind of like sideline love kind of evaporated. And obviously during games, you see him kind of jawing at each other. And the Bills fandom is like, Josh is the savior, So people are going to side with Josh. I mean, don't get me wrong. I have a Diggs signed jersey in my closet. So, like, he was pivotal, essential to the success they've had over the last 4 seasons. But I think in many ways, they found a way to win without him. I mean, like Mark kind of pointed out, when they did this run to make the playoffs, he started the season, I think, 5 out of 6 games, 100 yards, and then he kind of just wasn't there. So I think they found a way. I think they're going to go through Kincaid. I don't think Curtis Samuel and Shakir and Hollins are
they're not the answer.
They're not the answer.
They're
but
pieces.
I think
where you need to find.
You got James Cook.
One on
Josh
top.
Allen is RB1 in most cases. I just think it's a change of times.
All I'm saying is the Bills went. Let's count them up from 1999 until 2019. So that is a clean 20 seasons without winning 10 games. They got that 10-win season before Diggs arrived there, but that team was a little lucky to get there. Then the next 4 years, 13 wins, 11 wins, 13 wins, 11 wins. If you look at the
hold on.
If you look at the point differential, though, even better than the Chiefs the last couple of years. They have been one of the best teams in the NFL for 4 straight seasons. Diggs isn't by the only reason why, but he is a big reason why.
That's fine, because relative to what the Bills fans and what the Bills dealt with for in eras in a row, I get it.
Yeah.
But there's still 4 other teams that won the Super Bowl during the Stefon Diggs thing. And I know it's not it's like it's nice to have a 13-win season and 11-win season, but it's like I don't want to hear they're more successful than the Chiefs and some it's like
not than
stat
the Chiefs.
angle. The Chiefs win Super Bowls as a team.
Right.
And
I didn't say the Chiefs. I'm just saying other than the Chiefs, like they've been as consistent in what I don't know.
But in the end,
you got to be able
it's
to enjoy a
amounted to-
team that is successful, because you're going to be looking back on these as the good old days.
Yeah, no,
at
I had a
some point.
blast. I had a blast watching Diggs. In no way am I like good riddance. I mean, there are some things that stick out because of the messy end to it all. But like, I loved having Stefon on the team. I agree that the Bills are not better.
I mean, the crazy thing is they had a legit chance to win the Super Bowl last year. I mean, they played them even in that game, and they didn't come through. And who knows what would have happened, but it didn't happen. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to get to burning desires of teams around the NFL.
Yeah.
Oh.
He's from Alabama. His beard is hairy as a llama.
I like this one.
It's Patrick Claybon.
Yeah.
But you've just been to a barber where you've had your.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
Am I still in the llama range?
I don't know.
It's,
I'd have to investigate a llama closer. But
Yeah.
Maybe a llama after they were shaved down. It gets hot in the summer. I lived near a llama farm growing up. Not a lie. And they got to shave them. Yeah.
Were they meat llamas, or were they?
No.
Did they do llamas for what would you call? Would that be wool?
Actually, don't even. Yeah, I think that's why they had them. Was
a llama farm in Massachusetts? That's sort of not the first place I would target for that.
Where I grew up, there are all sorts of farms in Western Massachusetts. Fruit farms, animal farms. But yeah, I'm not going to name it. Maybe he doesn't want his name out there. But yeah, a kid who was in my class, his family owned the llama farm. And once it started getting hot, you'd see those llamas. There goes the wool.
Is that it?
Yeah, you gotta.
No, it's in Wilbraham, Massachusetts. Is
well,
where,
don't
where I
dom
grew
them
up.
out.
It's fine. I mean, maybe it'll
You
be
found another llama farm though.
It'll be good for business. I have no idea if it's still open, but it was right nearby. And no, I don't think there's that much of a resemblance between Patrick and those llamas. But look, if llamas look like Patrick Claybon, people would like llamas more. I feel like llamas don't get a lot of love out there. You know who's going to get a lot of love? Teams we haven't talked about in a little while. So we're going to go through as many teams as we can. And we're going to talk about the burning desires that these teams have heading into the NFL draft. And I guess I would put it to you guys. We'll try to get through as many as we can. I know everyone likes to hear their team talked about, so we're not going to go too long. But I would say to my friends Patrick and Mark, just I think start as strong as you can, because you never know how many we're going to get through. The most burning of desires, where the loins are just on fire. Start with those, and let's start with Marc Sessler.
I have been looking around at a number of different teams, and the one that stands out for me in terms of like you've got a glaring hole. Now, are we saying this has to be like the first round? Because
No,
I'm looking somewhere because it's not the greatest position group. There's a number of teams out there that I think need running backs.
Okay.
All right.
No, I think it's just issues.
Okay.
It doesn't matter where you fill them.
And we do talk about this team, but I look at the Dallas Cowboys as a team that like they've shifted around their offensive line a little bit. It's not the strength that it was once, and it hasn't been for years. But like you got issues at center potentially. But their starting running back is Deuce Vaughn, who I think is an interesting. We went to training camp and kind of fell in love with him.
Maybe Rico Dowdle, I would say, but if they had to play a game today,
right? And there's whispers that they're going to bring back Ezekiel Elliott, which to me just flies in the face of everything that they're attempting to try to tell anyone that they're doing. They're doing very little. There are a couple decent running backs in this draft. Maybe it's not first round, but I need to see this team bring in some juice and bring in some youth, and not re-sign Ezekiel Elliott, who is 3 or 4 years away out from being the guy he once was.
Yeah, and the bargain shopping, just I know that there's been a whole lot of all-in criticism. Like anytime anybody else does something, it's, are the Cowboys really all in? It can't be just bargain shopping the whole way through and trying to get a draft steal. Like at some point, they have to be proactive in shoring up a significant part of what this offense has been in the past 4 to 5 years. And I'm with you, Mark. Zeke can't be the answer, and I don't even know who the running back would be if they were to try to reach in round 2 or something like that. It's a horrible.
It's a short list.
But we say that, and there's a lot of good rookies that come out in the middle rounds every year, and some of these seem exciting. It depends on who you listen to. Trey Benson or Marshawn Lloyd sound to me like guys who would have a chance to come in and fill 225 carries at a high level if you can block for him. But that's part of the issue. I'm glad you mentioned the Cowboys. They were one of the 8 or so teams I had a biggest star around, because pick a position. Yeah. This roster suddenly has all sorts of issues. Interior offensive line, major issue. I'm assuming Tyler Smith is going to play left tackle, but he was one of the best guards in the league, I thought, last year. So it could be left tackle or guard, but like suddenly you really need a center and a guard. You need a running back. That was next on my list. I think you need a wide receiver. You're okay for 24 with Lamb, Cooks, and Tolbert, but you need to start developing another receiver there. They kind of fell apart last season because they didn't have anyone to play linebacker when Van Der Esch got hurt, and like linebackers are no longer important until the point where they're like ending the seasons for the Eagles and the Cowboys, and I think there's going to be a little bit of a correction. And like they've kind of reached last year for Mozzie Smith in the first round and Luke Schoonmaker, and maybe those two guys work out after quiet rookie years, but they need Mozzie Smith to start right now because they don't have any defensive tackles. So that's another position where they have about as many screaming needs and as many stars and like wins over the last few years as any team. But man, they have a lot of big ones, a lot of burning desires.
Buy into us.
I was looking for, just in terms of bad offenses, trying to go through something for another show, and I sorted by the.
Wait, what? You do other shows?
Yeah, there's a couple.
Gotta hedge your bets.
Can you be specific here? Who is our enemy?
Well, no, this was for Path.
A path to the draft on NFL Network.
Going through team needs. So, the rising tide lifts all boats. But I was looking
Has
at
Daniel Jeremiah on it, so kind of an enemy, but okay.
I was looking for the teams with the lowest average separation. The Cowboys are in the bottom 3 of the league. Like,
whoa.
That was surprising to me. I know Dak throws a lot of, tight window passes, and it's just everything shouldn't always be so hard.
Well, isn't that like a Mike McCarthy offense trademark where it's like, go win, guys, and the scheme isn't getting you open. Like, that's why they got sick of him in Green Bay.
And so, like, I understand, it's 2024, and we're not going to build the whole offense around a running back, but as good as Dak is, maybe take something off of his plate.
Yeah.
Just every once in a while.
That was the complaining an off season ago, and it's gotten worse.
All right, Patrick, hit me with another one.
All right.
Another team.
Let's go to another place that has a burning desire.
There we go.
A burning desire to me is when it's really a need. Like, it's obvious to you and everybody else that when you walk in the room, that's what you want. And we're going to have Nathaniel Hackett's offense coming back and having Aaron Rodgers, which I would make the argument that it's Aaron Rodgers' offense. And the Jets have been very proactive, but they have a burning desire, not just for a position, for Brock Bowers or Rome Odunze.
Ooh.
They need Aaron Rodgers to look out there, make eye contact with somebody, and do something based on their matchup that's completely independent of Nathaniel Hackett.
Interesting.
Well said.
And I think it's got to be one of those two players, considering where they're picking in the draft. If everybody's running to get quarterbacks, if somebody jumps up and has a higher opinion of Quinyon Mitchell or Terrion, if they've got to get one of those two guys.
I kind of love this. I especially think Bowers fits for a couple teams, and I almost thought the Jets were a candidate to maybe even trade up if they really want to go all in and get like Marvin Harris. It's like you go get the best wide receiver in the draft if you want to trade up with the Chargers, but the Chargers' own burning need makes that a little difficult. But if you replace Alan Lazard with Odunze, then you've got Mike Williams, Mike Williams is probably going to miss 5 or 6 games.
But he doesn't need to be open to make a catch, to Patrick's point.
I just think like you'd have the best wideout group in the league if the rookie plays up to what we think it can be.
Yeah, that would be sexy. And those are 3 guys. Like Garrett Wilson gets open on his own, Odunze, and Mike Williams to me is one of the best contested catch receivers in the NFL.
I didn't get this alluring music during my opener, so next time I hope I do.
I hope you do too.
Gross.
The New Orleans Saints. They make a lot of mistakes in their front office. And they survived, and they're in the middle. And sometimes they just like a player too much, and they give up multiple first-round picks to move up and sign a project by the name of Trevor Penning. That was in the first round a couple of years ago. Sometimes they get hooked on a guy and it works. It's Chris Olave. And then sometimes it's Trevor Penning, who seemed to be in the doghouse, and they wouldn't play him even when they were playing their 4th-string left tackle. Now they're entering a season right now without really any left tackle. I guess it'd be maybe Landon Young. Maybe it'd be Trevor Penning. And I look at this team, and I just look at, like, they don't have a third receiver. It's Olave and Shaheed, but you can survive without that. And I look at this position, and it's always concerning for a front office when you have a burning desire for a position you just tried to fill a couple years ago, but this guy seemed to get into some sort of interpersonal issue with the coach, which is also a feature of this organization, not a bug. Or it is a bug. I don't know.
It is a feature.
It is a feature and a bug.
And that's the most painful thing about it is, and that I had this as a burning desire myself, Greg.
You did.
Because it was a burning desire. I was in there in New Orleans during the draft, and it was so obvious that they needed a tackle. Like, that was what they were going to do, and so they get Trevor Penning, and there's the foot issue, and then there's Liz Frank, and it seems like this is, as Michael Thomas pointed out on Twitter, like this is a recurring theme where somebody has something, and then it's, well, let's see how it goes, and then the player has to get surgery on their own time, not during the season, and then they're late getting into the next season, and you wonder, if Ryan Ramczyk could have had that surgery that he had in February. If that's a December surgery, are things a little bit different now?
Right.
And so it's back. It's back as a burning desire. And do we start this whole process over again, or do they maybe try to move up, use whatever they can?
No, you can't.
To get a more.
No, this is a
sure
deep
thing?
class. So if nothing else, I think they could sit there and take one. But it's disappointing. I'm glad you mentioned Ramczyk. Dennis Allen told reporters, and I don't think we mentioned it on the show, that his procedure is not recovering as quickly as hoped, and he's had a lot of injuries. He was a really fantastic pick, a fantastic player whose injuries have caused him to miss significant time, and he hasn't been as effective. And there's been little whispers even about, like, not retirement because they renegotiated his contract, but just like his knee's in a lot of trouble. So that's two major issues for the Saints. I do want to hear the music behind you this time.
I do too. I can think of someone out there that went through a breakup. This individual engineered it, and so he's probably not the one feeling the heartbreak. But Sean Payton and the Russell Wilson relationship, which, a calendar year ago there was hope that he could make the most out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's over. That's out the door. And I can't think of another coach in the league. While everyone's hemming and hawing and keeping secrets about what they want to do, Sean Payton has openly talked about the Arizona Cardinals, another team sitting up there, the Chargers, in absolutely enviable positions for someone like him who has his eye, a wandering eye, on a new quarterback. Because I don't think Sean Payton wants to, after last season, mine into year 2 and do nothing in this position. Now he's in a tough spot because likely 4 of them will be gone. If they can't engineer a trade up, that was our last episode's concept, and we didn't have them doing that. Then you're looking at probably someone like Bo Nix out of Oregon to be Sean Payton's quarterback. And the more I've gotten into this player, I'm not saying it's the 5th quarterback, and that's risky, and you don't want to sell the farm on it, but he's accurate, he's athletic, he's got pocket poise, he's got a little bit of a running game to him. It sounds like someone that Sean Payton could work with. He's a heady quarterback. It's not ideal, but if you're Denver, less ideal is coming out of this with no quarterback at all and trying to make it through one more depressing year in Denver. Well, probably Russell Wilson is because the way football works, Russell Wilson's in Pittsburgh, winning games for a Steelers team that's 5-1.
Bo Nix does make a little sense to me for them, just maybe not at 12.
It's a little rich.
Get him in the 2nd round, get him in the 3rd round, maybe. A lot of times these quarterbacks, especially the 5th, 6th ones that we talk about, maybe going
or you could trade down back to
quite high.
32.
Don't go as high as you hope, because then you're really reaching for talent. Those comments from Payton at the owners' meetings really made me take a step back because, I've watched Sean Payton from afar for a long time, and the way he uses the media is one of a kind. And I guess the way I would say he uses the media very often is he does not tell the complete truth to them. So why are you throwing it out there that you want to trade up? It's okay, well then and it's this time of year, I'm not breaking any news that almost any coach and GM talking about their draft plans, you can look askance at. Why is he throwing that out so hard at an owners meeting? Because when I hear that, I sort of assume he means the opposite, which is that he's not going to be doing that.
No, I think
I don't know, but maybe he's Jedi mind tricking me to the point that he really is.
It's going to require a Jedi mind trick to go into the season with Jarrett Stidham and Ben DiNucci.
Right. He did say, Jarrett Stidham's going to have some serious competition. He did not want to entertain any questions that that's our guy.
Maybe he meant from Ben DiNucci.
Right. That sounds serious in the wrong way.
Nucci's coming. I do think beware of galaxy branding things that I think Sean Payton may be telling the truth.
Okay.
A lot of times, which is something he's got in trouble for, saying too much of the truth. But yeah, I think the player they want to trade for is Caleb. And that opportunity seems to have passed. And so what's he willing to give the farm for?
They do have more draft capital than people would realize. I keep thinking because of the Russell Wilson, they have a bunch of draft picks. They
also have a lot of needs. What is a position group that the Broncos feel great about? I don't see one. The offensive line,
Like Patrick Surtain's your best player, and they still need cornerbacks.
Right. Their second cornerback was picked on mercilessly, although they did find someone in Jaquan McMillan. It was a nice story for a nickelback. Simmons is no longer like. I guess they feel okay at safety. Caden Stearns and Brandon Jones. I don't even know. There's not a position group you look at and you're like, well, that's the identity of the team. That's a huge strength. They are very, very milquetoast to me. You know who else is not milquetoast?
Who's that?
The Arizona Cardinals. They don't even have any milk in their toast. Just toast. I heard one podcast. It was Bill Simmons with Mina Kimes saying that a lot of people going big on the over 6.5 for the Cardinals right off the bat. And there's this idea, and I like the Cardinals coaching staff, that the Cardinals are this team on the rise. And then I go to OurLads.com NFL depth charts, and I look. The entire roster is a burning desire. I have a burning desire for their entire defense to be improved. There's very little talent on it. Wide receiver would be another position. They've got an offensive line. They've got a quarterback. They've got James Conner. They really don't have much else. Their entire defense, I would say, is as talent poor. I would put it 32nd in the league out of 32. So to me, that is a burning, burning desire. And they inherited a tough situation. I really believe in the coaching staff. I think this is going to be a good coaching staff based on what I saw a year ago, and that can improve your team. But, man, they need a talent infusion. I think they're going about it the right way, trading back, getting more picks last year, and you hope those picks hit. I think they had a good draft last year. They might be trading back again. But when I see a burning desire, I see the fire of Jonathan Gannon saying, I need some players to go along with this scheme that is working pretty well, because I do not see a lot of strengths on this team. I see a whole lot of weaknesses.
I think if you're a Cardinals fan, if you're watching what's happened over the last 13 months, you have to be extremely encouraged. I'm with you on the coaching staff. I will say this because
I get it. I get it. Like, we've encouraged from the bottom of the barrel to next, but to me, it's like, I think you look at this and it's like, man, they have a lot of work.
If they hit on the draft picks, though, because I think the master plan is it feels to me it's 80% that they trade out of the 4th spot, and then you've got, let's say it's the Vikings, the most likely trade partner. You've got the 11th and the 23rd, and I think you address maybe edge, maybe it's Dallas Turner, for instance, at 11 if you ever got down there past the Falcons. And then you get your wide receiver at 23, and you've had 2 major needs addressed, and you've accrued probably additional picks and everything else.
Or it's a corner, or it's like an interior off defensive line. I mean, the good part of needing something everywhere, and they might be pushing back Cardinals fans saying, hey, we hit on Garrett Williams last year. Yeah, he was a good rookie, but you still need more than one. And Budda Baker, you could almost improve any position on the roster, other than I think you feel pretty good about tackle and quarterback.
But when those are your needs, it does put you in a position where if you're in a trade down spot, you can fill a couple of those spots. You can get down into the early teens, take a shot at Jared Verse. You get your edge, depending on how you want to fill things out. But if it's not, because I think the easy idea is stay and take Marvin Harrison Jr. Right, that's the.
It's also not the worst idea.
Yeah, not a bad one.
If that's the problem, then you're in a good spot. I mean, of course, you'd like to have better talent on your roster.
Absolutely.
But there's not a situation like this isn't a Saints type situation where you have to stay and watch everybody pick, and then I hope we get a tackle because this is clearly what we need. They could do whatever they want.
All right, what I want to do, or what I'm asked to do, is take a quick break. And we'll be back after this.
I don't trust Gregg during these breaks. Who knows what he's going to get up to?
Especially when desire's burning.
Yeah, we're back. We got burning desires. And I got a burning desire to hit as many teams as possible. So we're going to try to go even faster with this last little segment. And I'm going to start with a burning desire of the Miami Dolphins. I feel like they haven't gotten a lot of attention this year, this offseason. I like what they've done. I like their roster. They got a sneaky desire. They've spent a lot of money on Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb, but they've also lost a couple of big-time rotational edge guys this year. One of their starters, Phillips, is coming off a torn Achilles. One of them's coming off of a torn ACL. And I look at their front, their edge, and then especially defensive tackle right next to those edges, and I see a big holes on that Miami front. So I think that is a position group, whether it's interior
Miami.
or the edge, planning a little bit for the future that they need, because Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb might not be ready for week 1, and it's unfair to expect them to be kind of full Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb in week 1.
Yeah, people have linked like Byron Murphy,
That would be good.
Texas. That makes sense. I flip it and say that they have an issue at left guard. Like they cannot. I just don't like the idea of not having the best possible offensive line with Tua the way he is. But you can't do both.
Maybe can coach. Yeah, can coach. I mean, you can do both. You can do it in the second and third round.
Right.
And yeah, I think they've done a good job coaching up
There aren't a lot of great guards in this one, but
the offensive line.
Yeah, the interior offensive line jumps out there to me because they've done so much, right, in terms of facilitating the skill positions on the team that you're not even necessarily worried about it. And you think, considering the way that they can play, and when
You might want to plan a little bit for the future. I did think about writing down third receiver, but for now, you're right. It's
Yeah.
hard to say that's not a burning desire. That's just like a little. That'd be nice.
But I feel the intense heat emanating off of the interior offensive line,
right.
as
Right.
as well as some spots on the defense.
All right, Mark. Let's go.
I am the most fascinated outside of Houston with the Los Angeles Chargers under Jim Harbaugh, because I think up at number 5, if they don't move, they're gonna get it. They probably get Marvin Harrison Jr. That's nice, and that addresses a lot of issues. But they're still going to be like this run-heavy, old-school team from like 1936. I think at certain times, if they're up and they want to do that, and it's like Gus Edwards, I like a lot actually, and I think he fits well, and like he's obviously got the Harbaugh stamp of approval from his Baltimore time as well. But I'm looking at what they do at the running back position too, and I know we mentioned that for the Cowboys. So there are a couple teams competing for running backs later on, and then I'm like realizing you can go Jonathan Brooks from Texas. I watched some of him, interesting player, but then there's Blake Corum from Michigan, literally Jim Harbaugh's old running back, not rated as highly by most, and not maybe Derrick Henry Part 2, but just like what will Harbaugh do to? I think he's going to want like 4 or 5 running backs to compete. And like lead the league in rushing attempts. And so I just want to see, because there's so many Michigan players in the draft, how many Jim Harbaugh Michigan players link up through this whole process.
I think we may get a couple, but I also don't think, considering because we've seen how much of the Ravens staff is in Los Angeles now, like how much of that shared, that it's not just the self scouting that's gone on in Michigan, but Harbaugh's not coming into this being completely unaware of NFL. This isn't like an Urban Meyer type situation where a guy's just freestyling and doesn't necessarily know what the players are and who the competition is. I do think that while if the player's in the right spot, we will see Michigan guys over there. But I do think the general view of how Harbaugh is going to run this thing, especially starting with the draft, might not necessarily be the ultimate turnout. I do think the world is kind of open.
I do too, and I think a wide receiver is very possible at that pick. Everyone thinks they're just going to do offensive line because he's so into the offensive line.
At 5.
We'll see at 5.
Right, I'm with you.
They're exciting. They have a lot of needs. Who else has?
Oh, well, we've talked a lot about the Houston Texans. But sometimes you look and see how happy the neighbor is. And you start to wonder about your own relationships. And I think the Jacksonville Jaguars have a burning desire, not just for talent in general, but let's discuss the cornerback situation and then the secondary situation in Jacksonville. Yeah. A great football mind in Gregg Rosenthal pointed out to me, despite my excitement about the 2023 Jacksonville Jaguars before the season, there's some real problems in the secondary. And those problems did hold up. And there are some cornerback needy teams in front of the Jags. I'm looking at the Indianapolis Colts, but let's say there's a Quinyon Mitchell or a Kool-Aid McKinstry or a Terrion Arnold. I think one of those guys could fulfill a burning desire for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, I think it was probably a debate. What's their biggest need, like an interior defensive lineman or a cornerback? And then they get Armstead, and then that kind of answers that question. They need a wide receiver too. I really believe it, and I think they'll be open to it. At that point in the draft, there's a chance that it's Brian Thomas, but maybe they look at someone that it's a second-round pick at wide receiver. But they seem very much like a cornerback, wide receiver type of team. When you sign Ronald Darby, who I've always kind of liked, that he's a little better than you think, but he's that guy that kind of gets signed to late in the mix to fill in for your starters and then plays more than you think. And you're like, oh, that was a good signing. This time he was like an early signing because they were just like, we need someone to start. We're signing him. If that's your number 2 cornerback, you need more. You need more in the future.
They were lost in the woods without Christian Kirk towards the end of the season. Like it was a dire situation.
They did not expect to lose.
They fell off the side of the earth.
They did not
as an
expect to lose
organization.
Calvin Ridley. They really thought, I think it was going to be Ridley, Gabe Davis, and Zay, and Christian Kirk. Still reasonably deep. I like the Devin Duvernay signing. Let's stay in the division. The Colts just keep keeping their guys. That's what they do. They signed Julian Blackman, safety, this week. Thought that was a nice move. But they need more. They need more pizzazz around Anthony Richardson. Keeping Michael Pittman is not enough. You need another receiver. This is another team I look at as receivers and cornerbacks. Receiver and cornerback. Like they need them both. They don't have enough juice with Gus Bradley in their defense, and they tried with a couple picks last year at cornerback, and they're young there, but they could add another. But they keep taking receivers, and Alec Pierce right now looks like kind of a foul ball. That's not really working out. Josh Downs, I think, is going to be a solid single, especially for a third-round pick, maybe even better than that, maybe a double. But I think they need more juice at wide receiver and cornerback. Those are 2 positions.
Yeah, cornerback really stands out, but it's like we don't know a lot about Anthony Richardson. I like what we saw, but it's like, of course, just like keep giving him targets, tight ends, wide receivers, because their overall wide receiver group is just kind of like blah.
Mm-hmm.
Bowl of vanilla ice cream.
Let's get some guys who can make some plays on their own. How about you, Mark?
Let's go out to Seattle.
Ooh, good. I was waiting for that.
New coaching staff. They've got defensive tackle needs. You could look at a couple of different parts of the defense, but I am focused on the interior offensive line to keep Geno Smith safe, to open up the ground game. They've got 4 guys right now competing for the center and 2 guard spots who have a combined 16 starts in professional football. And some of that's developmental, and you always hear them say, we like our young guys, but it's like in a pretty solid offensive line draft, like whether it's you're going to get a different tackle to move someone around, like let's just keep working on this offensive line. That's where I'd start with Seattle.
And it was bad last year, and I think it's the reason why I push back against a lot of the Geno criticism from a year ago, because the offensive line really struggled. And if you kind of divorce him from like plays he was protected, he did really well. They also need an edge. Like, to me, they just keep. I don't know what they're doing on defense exactly. Mike McDonald comes in, and they bring in Aiden Dirty to be their defensive coordinator, Dirty from Dallas, the defensive line coach from a totally different system. So I think that's good. He's like welcoming in different thoughts. It's going to be Mike McDonald's team, though. But they've been just kind of picking around the edges here. In general, they fixed their linebacker position. They signed Jerome Baker, Terrell Dodson, or at least changed their linebacker position. But they just keep adding all these edges that are just like, okay. Like Boye Mafe, Darrell Taylor, Nwosu was a good signing. They drafted Derek Hall in the 2nd round last year. That didn't exactly work. Like, they still need like a guy that's a dude. Like they have a lot of good 2s and 3s. They need a 1. And I think when I think about a Mike McDonald defense, I think you definitely want that.
Yeah, and especially considering because the Ravens defense on the interior last year, just a breakout year on the part of Justin Madubuike. Jadeveon Clowney had his best season in a very, very long time, and you just wonder who's the guy that's going to play 75% of the snaps out there on the edge, maybe get 8.5, 9 sacks, and isn't really coming off the field. And I think they've tried. I think that's what the Mafe pick, the Taylor pick, and
it's the same GM, so it's a little. That's where where they are is a little confusing to me. Not confusing, but it's just a different sort of overhaul that John Schneider, the guy who in theory was making the picks, although we know it was him and Carroll, now it's really just Schneider.
So now the problem is fixed. Pete's out.
Well, no, I don't know that.
I
think they've got a chance. I think they've got a chance to be pretty good, actually. They have a lot of things that you would want. I'm going to talk about team I feel like it's kind of gotten under the radar a little bit, the 49ers this offseason, just because they haven't done a lot. And when I look at their offensive line especially, but I would look at cornerback too, of like, they always make the offensive line work. They always make the cornerback room work. And you can't pay everyone, and this is the salary cap era. and they're paying money to their receivers and Nick Bosa, and they're going to pay Brandon Ayuk. Hopefully, I think that will happen eventually. You got to get cheap elsewhere. But man, wouldn't it be nice to have some like badass offensive linemen? You got Trent Williams and just 4 guys you coach up, and then you got Charvarius Ward and some guys you coach up. And so I think this is a draft issue that they're only going to get these premium players if they can hit on draft picks. And it's a tough needle to thread. You can find your Ayuk deep in the first round, and that'll change your team. And to me, they could really use that at cornerback and especially the offensive line. Instead of coaching them up enough to be like good enough, like let's have some badasses. Trent Williams is not going to be, at this Hall of Fame ridiculous level forever. And cornerbacks.
I could see them as a candidate to trade up if they love a tackle and they can swing a deal to not wait until 31 to get the guy. If there's a run on tackles, and I agree, like they could get someone to come in and compete at right tackle, and Trent Williams is still there, but it's like be aggressive. You're the Niners. Like don't wait for the 3rd or 4th, 5th best option.
The salary cap is real. I always, it's an exaggeration to say it's not real, but it can be negotiated. For more teams than not, it's harder to find great to good players to use that cap space on. The 49ers are the exception. They keep finding these great players so much that it really is an issue with them in terms of team building that it makes John Lynch have to really hit these picks. And I just feel looking at the roster, they again are kind of at a point where they need to start infusing the next super duper stars, and that's tough to do.
And it's especially when so many teams are in a position where it's even worse than the 49ers up front. Like they don't have a Hall of Famer at left tackle to say, well, at least that's there.
True, and a coach that seems to make it work.
Yeah, and they're competing against the rest of the league, which is in a similar position of need, where now, thanks to their success, more than half of the league is running the same offense.
Right.
So everybody's looking for the same player.
I know that.
And picking ahead of them in this draft, too.
We have not reached saturation. To me, Alex Van Pelt in New England might be the saturation point. Look, they haven't all worked either. Like, Luke Getsy with the Bears didn't really work. Like, that's that tree. Not everyone in this tree is going to work, but at some point, the saturation is an issue. Like, when 8 to 10 GMs in the league were drafting similar players to the Patriots because they were all Patriots disciples around the league. I think that created a real, competitive problem for the Patriots and these other teams. And I think the same thing's going to happen with all these McVay offenses at some point, but it hasn't totally happened. Let's go speed round. We'll each go one last one.
Well, yeah, I'm looking at the team that just lost to the San Francisco 49ers. That was a fun team for all of us, the Detroit Lions.
Glad you picked them.
They have a burning desire for a playmaker in the secondary. I really don't care if it's a cornerback, if it's a safety, maybe it's a Cooper DeJean. Who knows? But this identity of this football team, you can find it every place, even in quarterback and Jared Goff, all the way to the defensive line. But the secondary is just kind of there.
And they've been trying,
and they don't have a ton of needs, so it's like go get that thing that you need.
I would push back a little bit on that one. I think they need help up front on both sides. And you're right, they're in a good spot where it's not these screaming needs, but they came in drafting Penei Sewell saying they're going to be all about the offensive line. He is by far the youngest guy on that offensive line. It's an older group. They haven't brought in anyone that's made any difference there, and so I think they need to start thinking about the future on the offense and the defensive line. Their defensive line picks, other than Hutchinson, have been, not all bad, but they haven't had big hits. And if you're counting on Marcus Davenport and DJ Reader to be your starters coming off injuries and stuff, I think they get back to a Dan Campbell meat and potatoes lineman on both sides. See, I snuck in my opinion on that one. It wasn't mine.
I'd go to Baltimore. I think that it's fair to say that they are in this state in life where they're a little reckless. They need all sorts of things. They have more needs than you'd realize. And it starts with the fact that they let John Simpson, Kevin Zeitler, Morgan Moses all leave off the offensive line. You still have Ronnie Stanley, Patrick McCarry, Tyler Linderbaum, but you need help at guard, I think, or look at an upgrade there. But I could also say you could you could upgrade a tackle if you wanted to. You need edge rushers. You have no more Odell Beckham, and you're in a place at wideout where you've reversed back a season where you've taken weapons away from Lamar Jackson. So they could go in a lot of different directions here. I wouldn't have a problem with them picking a different changing wideout as well. But like they kind of need a lot. Like the Ravens bled a lot of talent off this roster.
They did, and probably more than any team in the league, their roster feels like an incomplete now, just because we know how they work, playing the supplemental or compensatory pick game and waiting and signing a lot of veterans. I think there's 17 guys left off my 101. They're going to be signing, I feel like, a lot of players that are free agents and available that end up playing 300 to 500 snaps for them. And Eric DeCosta and his predecessor, Ozzie Newsome, who's still there. I mean, it's like this guy retires and then he's in the booth at the combine.
Yeah.
Is he really retired? I don't know. To me, he's probably contributing. They do a great job, but I'm with you. I feel like they have a lot of snaps to still find this offseason.
They do always have like 17 to 18 third-round picks at the end of the third round.
And so they'll do it that way. But I'm with, especially you shouted out edge rusher. I think that is definitely something they would want to address. Cornerback is another. For my final one, where shall I go? You know, when it comes to the Patriots, it's just been all quarterback talk.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a left tackle. It's possibly the worst wide receiver group in the NFL.
I'll make the case it is.
I think Christian Gonzalez is going to be a great pro. They need cornerbacks. Like, a lot of needs here. Just saying. They have some burning desires outside of quarterback.
I don't know. Like, it's interesting because we could have imagined what Bill Belichick might do in this situation. It's hard to know what this front office will do necessarily, but like, there is a way that they can get too cute and not get a quarterback. I get that you trade down, but then too cute and don't get a wide receiver, and too cute and don't get one of these other. Just like, you need everything, but get the positions that you want a rookie contract. Like, you want a quarterback on a rookie contract. You want if you're gonna have a diva wideout, you want him on a rookie contract. Like, you want a left tackle, you want him on a rookie contract versus like trying to pick up these other. Their group of wideouts is one of the least creative team building collections of pass catchers you can imagine in the last half decade.
It's pretty rough. Kendrick Bourne is your best guy, but he's coming off a torn ACL. Pop Douglas was good last year. I mean, they just have issues, and yet I do not think they should trade out if Adam Schefter is right, as he said on his podcast just this week, giving me this hope that he really thinks it's Jaden Daniels at 2. When he puts that out there in early April, he's tended to be right.
Daniels at 3. Versus the Commanders taking Daniels.
He says, what did I just say? I said...
You said Daniels at 2.
Yes,
yeah, just
that's what I want.
That's what...
I want Drake
Greg
May.
wants Drake May.
I would be happy with Jaden Daniels too, but I really like the idea of Drake May.
Well, let's hope that every Patriots fan gets what they want at quarterback after 2 or 3 tough seasons to deal with.
All right.
Our hearts go out to you.
That was it. Eagles, get a freaking linebacker. It keeps ruining your seasons, and then you get a linebacker. You didn't know what you had with Kaiser White. Bucks, get an edge.
Giants, get a running back. I keep bringing up running back, but Devin Singletary's not taking you to the finish.
Rams in a good spot, I think, but certainly need a lot more help. Don't make it so hard on your defensive coordinator. You definitely need to try to replace not just Aaron Donald, but get more edge help too. What a show. What a lot of fun with you guys.
Always good.
Thanks to everyone listening. We will be back next week with 3 shows. Dan will be back. And until then, thank you to Eric. I know it's a big day for your Bills. For Marc Sessler, Patrick Claybon. Heed the call.